I think the story of Kirk, Michael, my son, Cameron, my grandson, is really a story of America. The tragedy of failure and the tragedy of success.
As an actor, it was really intimidating watching my father because his persona, his presence was so strong and so dynamic that, forget acting, you just didn't even know how you'd ever be a man.
For the first time in my life, people cheering for me.
I'm Spartacus.
You had a child by him. Then you went to that butcher Schneider. Everything I hate.
Maybe I like to be cheap once in a while. Maybe everybody does.
Because I'm a loner clear down deep to my very guts. Anybody else want to try their luck?
Keep it up, Arch. Put another hole in that chin of yours.
Before or after you take your nap, Grandpa?
I said to Michael, I had it much easier than you because I came from abject poverty. There was nowhere go but up. But you come from a nice swimming pool, a father who's a star. That's much more difficult to overcome.
It's hard when you're saying, well, I think I can act. I mean, this is around the same time when people say, why are you acting? I mean, why don't you won the Academy Award as a producer, why don't you just produce? I said, well, I think I like acting, I think I can offer something.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
What you want?
This morning.
I'm pregnant.
Well, first of all, the 200 pairs of eyes are not focused on me. They're focused on you.
Fuck you, motherfucker! If our family members are the enemy, and I don't know how you wage war on your own family.
Sometimes my speech gets in the way of what I want to imagine.
Not too
Imagine what it is to have a stroke. It's very interesting because speech, you take it for granted. You think of thing, you're saying it. I think a thing, and then I have to articulate each word. So my thought is here in my speech is going very slowly. And then that's frustrating and exhausting.
But great for oral sex.
I don't know why I put up with you. Look, you have two Oscars, one as a producer in my movie, Michael. Remember that movie? I'm going to cry.
But you see, it's good to know that all is forgiven, and this is not
All
close.
is forgiven?
It's good to know it's not on the edge of your kind of half joke about it, which is cuckoo's nest. And I guess I'd ask you, thinking in hindsight, what would I do? What do you think I should have done differently?
Oh boy, that's a good question.
What do you think
yes,
you see me
yes,
having done
save it. I would answer that. I could have been a contender
Well, I know that. I know.
Because that was a low point in my life. Because I bought the book from Ken Kesey. I paid Dale Wasserman to make stage play.
Stage play, yeah.
Contrary to the advice of my agent, I went to Broadway.
But I'm asking you what I could have done.
I
I
wa-
know how important it is.
Wait a
Ben.
minute, can I?
But make me more guilty?
Oh,
I mean, I
my
know how
God.
important it is. I know how important
have
it
to
is.
say
I just
that-
asked you what I could do.
All
right, go ahead.
I
Sorry,
have to preface
That's fine.
it
Okay.
by all these remarks.
Okay.
Then it culminates.
I didn't get it. I did. Like, you've been working all those years. I finally pulled it off
Exactly.
that last year. But I've been working on
Don't
it for years
rub it
before.
in.
I'm not rubbing it in. I'm just
Because I
saying,
couldn't
sure.
do it, and you did it.
Times
you-
have changed.
Okay, Michael, go ahead. And I thought maybe that part,
McMurphy.
that I played so brilliantly on Broadway, I would play in the movie. It was not to be. I suddenly learned in paper that Jack Nicholson is going to play my part. So what could you have done? You were the producer. You could have said, no. My father must play that part.
But let me ask you something. You don't think the director has some control about the casting of the movie?
Now, when you were the producer,
When I'm 29 years old, my first picture as producer.
did you ever?
Life changes.
Did you ever
Don't
ask?
Don't raise your voice at me.
Did you ever ask them?
If for you to play the part?
Yeah.
Dad, I mean, how could you? We've been. You cannot believe. I didn't only ask them. I cajoled and I persuaded and everything else, Dad. But you know, things had changed. I mean, I'm sorry, ages and everything else. It's hard to accept and
I
recognize
was
that.
too old. I'm ready to
Jack
play
Nicholson
that
was
part
24.
now.
Jack Nicholson was 24 years younger than you at the time.
So what?
So much. So much.
All
So
right.
I just want to be, that's always,
I forgive you.
I forgive you. I forgive you.
The big hero of my story is my father and mother, that they made it to this country. They came from Russia about 1910, series class, to hopefully come to a place where the children have a chance. The secret of America is you have a chance. And that's wonderful.
Kirk taught her how to write her name, and she wanted it so much. She wanted to go to night school. She was very learned in Russian, spoke Russian very well.
My father started off a ragman, the lowest on the economic scale.
He was very strong physically, but emotionally, he had a temper, and he wasn't the best father.
He was a failure. He could hardly support the family. I had 6 sisters. I was the only boy. And we all worked to help support the family.
He had told me stories about, there never being any food in the refrigerator, or if there was, that his father would take it.
Once, when I was younger, we were all sitting on the table. My father was at the end.
I guess we're eating, and my father dozed off, in there.
Well, I was here with my cup of hot tea, and there was my father who looked so big, so strong. I felt weak and weaker. And then I took my spoon.
Kirk had that desire.
I took the spoon of tea and I flipped it.
You flipped it.
Right in my father's face. Yeah! It was like a lion. He picked me up and he threw. I like to think that he knew there was a cat there, but I felt good. I thought I faced the line and I survived.
Oh, that's true.
It was hard for him to express his delight with my success.
You're a cruel and vengeful man. You're everything you always said you hated in your own father.
I came to look at, to find him, and it was afternoon, and I found him in the bar, sitting all alone, drinking Boilermakers.
I'm gonna get somewhere. Make money. Take care of the old lady. I'm not gonna be a hey you all my life. I want to hear people call me mister. I'm gonna make something of myself.
You know, Pa, I did a movie, Champion, yeah. Do you see it? Yeah. Do you like it? Yeah. That's about was the end of the conversation. Every son wants the approval of his father. He wants the pat on the back. And that was a tragedy in my life that I never got that from my father because he wasn't able to give it.
My father, and in fact, to some extent, is still trying to get out of Amsterdam, New York. And here he is, 86 years old, and a wealthy man with a career of some close to 90 pictures. You know, so sometimes I think that little boy just doesn't leave us.
You know, my father never called my mother by her name, Bryna. That's why I named my company Bryna. He would, hey, tell the missus. Never, I thought, I never heard her, I guess he must have, but I never heard him, Bryna. He couldn't, right? Isn't that awful?
Kirk has always said to her, one of these days I'm going to put your name up in lights, and it's going to be before mine. He called it, named his thing, Briner Production by Kirk Douglas underneath.
I took her once on Times Square in a big limousine, and we stopped opposite a billboard that was a whole block. And they said, you see, Ma, your name that I taught you, Bryna, Bryna present the Vikings. And my mother looked at it, she said, America is such a wonderful land.
Kirk was the first movie star to desert the studio system and to form his own production company, the Bryner Company. Unheard of.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Kirk was about to do a film called Paths of Glory, and he was looking for a director, so he called up this young 26-year-old director and said, I'd like you to do Paths of Glory. The director's name was Stanley Kubrick.
When I formed my own company, you know, I did the Vikings, I did Spartacus, I did Path of Glory.
Where it came from, for him to have this sense of individualism, and he's always been somewhat of a loner, but this sense of individuality or this critique and this literary sense, I don't know.
You've been after the job from the start. We all know that, my boy.
I may be many things, but I'm not your boy.
Well, I certainly didn't mean to imply any biological relationship.
I didn't want to be a mogul, but I wanted to have more say in what I would do.
I apologize for not being entirely honest with you. I apologize for not revealing my true feelings. I apologize, sir, for not telling you sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man.
And you can go to hell before I apologize to you now or ever again.
You're in the Navy, and you see a Life magazine cover of this beautiful gal, and it says, I know that girl, I went to school with her. No, you don't. You don't. I tell you, I know that girl. And he says, you know what, I'm gonna marry that girl.
He came back a few months later, and we did manage to have lunch. Then we went to a matinee, and then we had dinner, and then he asked me to marry him over dinner.
And that's how relationship and divorces happen, when you decide before you hardly know somebody that you're gonna go marry them.
When Michael was born, the day he was born, Kirk was doing a play called Kiss and Tell in New York. And I probably shouldn't tell the story, but I will. And when he came back, it had been kind of a long labor, over 10 hours and everything. And he came back between the matinee and evening performance. And as he walked in, he said, God, what a day I've had. And there was a big water pitcher, and I always picked it up, and I thought, should I throw it at his head or not? But I didn't.
Her father was the Attorney General of Bermuda, and she had a wonderful quality that she still has. It's that openness.
I had some inkling that something was going on with him and his various leading ladies, but with this one in particular.
Yes, I like women. I like Marilyn Maxwell. He was beautiful.
Winner takes all.
Yes, sir.
I've never had this experience myself, but what would it be like to be Kirk Douglas?
Come here.
And now every woman that you see on the set, in the trailer, in the makeup room, in the hallway, in the commissary, they're all kind of saying, hey, hello. That would be tough to deal with.
I'm expensive. Awful expensive. I didn't want you to think you could...
And I think he dealt with it very well if he limited it to just leading ladies.
Does it still hurt, doll?
I mean, just consider the restraint that took.
I remember Lana trying to do, I remember Bad and the Beautiful. I remember coming to visit the set, and it just happened to be the day he was doing the love scene. And I'll never forget it. He had her, and I went, oh my God. And he had her, and he looked up, and I was like right over Lana turned his shoulder. And he looked up, and he said, son.
I don't know. I guess I was a bad boy. Yes, I have had lots of women in my life.
I said I wanted a divorce, and he said, before you finally make up your mind, would you go and talk to the doctor?
Women, to me, are a byproduct of success.
The doctor said to me, it boils down to what you can put up with and what you can't. And I said, well, I cannot put up with chronic infidelity. I find it diminishing as a woman. That I can't deal with. And if there is not a basis of trust in a marriage, then it's not a marriage to me.
I think my earliest memory would be around 2 or 3, and that's them fighting. Not physically fighting, but voices being raised.
Sad. He was crying.
I remember the scene. I remember when Michael came in, and
That was poignant.
that was one of the reasons I decided to get the divorce too. It was so deeply upsetting to him, and seeing his father and I arguing. Finally, when I decided to get the divorce, and I said, look, for once, let's really be honest with each other. I don't think this is anything that you're going to be able to stop doing. And he said, no, I can't. And I said, well, thank you, because you freed me now in a way to be able to go ahead and live my life and go on. And I loved him then. I really respected him and loved him for that.
I remember when we moved to New York, and the first time the dad came to visit the apartment, and I remember that vividly, it must have been 5, and he walked in and he kissed my mother high on the cheek, and I broke into tears sobbing. Ran in the room, because the emotional release, the lack of no tension, that there was no tension
And I realized then how much he must have been, you know, anxious. There was that they said hello, and as a result, their divorce was always amicable.
I fell in love with Anne in Paris while I was shooting Act of Love. I kept thinking of her, so I called her.
I received a phone call, and it was from Kirk. I'd like to have a relationship with you, and it's you alone. Little did I know. And
she was so difficult to get into bed.
And one day he says to me, my ex-wife is visiting with the children. And I said to myself, aha, this is my exit. He came back from work and he said, I have to talk to you. And all of a sudden, he just turned his head and he said, I want you to marry me. I totally fainted.
A year later, I married her in Las Vegas.
I never expected that because he enjoyed his bachelorhood. First of all, I don't think that many men are very faithful anyway. I had a long conversation with him after we got married. And I said, let's be honest. If you tell me, I know it's just because it's somebody in the movie or it's somebody that's just en passant. But if you don't tell me, then I will consider that something more serious. But that pact was not kept. Suppose your best friend is going to say to you, watch out for Barbara because she pretends to be your friend, but really she has an affair with your husband. In Kirk's life, there was somebody like that. And I knew her. She wasn't that close to me, but I knew her and we saw each other socially. And I put him at that time in front of an ultimatum. I said, this has to stop, and we don't see her or her husband or anybody anymore. He had to make the choice. That I couldn't live with. It wasn't easy. And you also feel a little bit, I felt I was a little bit diminished and insecure.
As the years went on, you know, I've gotten, tremendous respect for the lady, and primarily because, Dad's not the easiest, is not easy to live with. And my Lord, they've endured now 45 years.
Listen, in every man and woman relationship, sex dominates the relationship at the beginning. But if you survive lots of obstacles...
And we had ups and downs in 48 years.
You have a deeper rapport with the other person, and it's as if you are seeing the other person for the first time. I love my wife more now than I have ever loved her.
And really the happiest years of our life have been in the last 12 years.
Dad, I think, he's taken a lot of risks.
Symbol of the Senate. Oh, the power of Rome. That's the power of Rome.
Take on a picture like Spartacus, which at the time was the largest independent ever undertaken.
Tell them we want nothing from Rome. Nothing. Except our freedom.
A lot of films that Kirk produced were struggles against the studio system, or against the political realities. Real, strong statements for those days.
It's no accident that later when he made Spartacus that he hired a blacklisted writer like Dalton Trumbo. It's no accident that when he talked about slavery in that movie that he was making a point about right now. And about what the 60s would become in terms of the civil rights movement.
Well, why doesn't he kill him? Kill him. Well, what's the matter now?
Kill him! Kill him, you imbecile!
Kill him!
Kill him!
Now, the writer of Spartacus was Dalton Trumbo. Dalton Trumbo was one of the blacklisted writers, but he's one of the most gifted screenwriters of the generation. He wrote Spartacus. At the end of the film now, Ed Lewis, who is the line producer, Kubrick and Kirk say, well, whose name goes on is the writer. And I remember that Kirk told me that Kubrick said, well, put my name on it.
I felt offended by that. I said, Stanley, wouldn't you feel terrible to take credit for a body of work?
Kirk said, you know something? The film is done. Universal has to distribute it. It costs too much to put it on the shelf.
And I went home that night and I thought about it. I said, the hell with it. I'm going to put Dalton Trumbo's name on the screen. What can happen?
And I remember Ed Lewis said, Kirk, if you do that, it could cost you your career. And Kirk said, I don't care. He wrote it. His name goes on the screen.
Oh, people will say, Kirk, you will never be able to work again, and that's so dangerous.
Film open and their screenplay by Dalton Trumbo.
The sky didn't fall in, and the blacklist was broken.
Several days later, Kirk gets a letter. And the letter said, Dear Kirk, thank you so much for giving me back my name. Thank you, Dalton.
I think I'm more proud of that than anything I ever done in movies.
Today, these young people don't understand the kind of courage putting to hazard his whole career because of something he deeply believed in.
I think it's all over. Kelly's through. He's all through. He's finally washed up. He's finished. We're getting a new champion tonight.
You know, early on, I mean, we know the roles that he's famous for. We know the intensity, we know the rage. He was a pretty intense guy.
Well, what do you know? Aren't you the big shot? Pull. Have you got any friends with push like me? Oh, everybody else is going to let you go. The courts, the judges, the juries, everybody except me.
For a little kid, he was intimidating. He intimidated adults, and he was a lot out of control.
And Dad was very much was a bully. To an extent.
The temper you saw on the set was Dad's persona.
Chuck! Buy yourself a dozen silver foxes, but you're gonna wear this.
Don't, Chuck. Don't.
He just didn't know emotionally. When he was frustrated, he would just get angry, you know? He just, and you see it professionally.
Wasn't obviously the normal kind of, father.
Spartacus was on TV, I think, and I mentioned, how great Kirk looked and so on. And I remember Michael says, yeah, but when you're young and you see your father on the big screen crucified and saying, I did this for my son.